Hello, today you will hear a story about a man's revenge. Zena and Vasily had known each other since they were in parallel classes at school. At first, they did not pay any attention to each other, but then something drew them together. It was in the 7th grade. At first it was just friendship and all that. Childhood is childhood. Then, by the 11th grade, their friendship had grown into something more. Eventually, Zena and Vasily realized that their love would really need to be cemented by marriage. Her parents looked the same way. However, Zena's father at first said that it was all stupidity, and that Zena should stay away from that rag, Vasily, but then he accepted the fact and stopped saying anything. The fact was that Zena was her exemplary pupil, got good marks, never argued with the teachers. In general, she was one of the most exemplary pupils in the school. She was even put up on the honor board. Vasily, on the other hand, was quite a bully at school, though this did not prevent him from getting a good grade in school. However, arguing with the teachers was his favorite pastime. Several times, even experienced and very qualified teachers could not stand it and wrote a letter of resignation. Vasily could not be influenced either by the head teacher, principal, or parents. However, because of his good grades and successful participation in the German language Olympiad, Vasily won prizes every year. He was not expelled from the school, although they threatened to do so repeatedly. But time is of the essence, and children have grown up. Vasily did not waste extra time at university, but joined the army for compulsory military service first. They taught him to drive a truck, and then Vasily decided on his future profession. After demobilization, he decided to become a truck driver. And so he became one. He started to drive trucks not only within the country, but also abroad. It was his long, tiresome journeys abroad which brought him the most money. Zena, meanwhile, was studying at the medical university. She studied, as always, diligently, and so all the time she was busy. All their free time she devoted to her studies. Vasily tolerated it with indulgence. He could see if Zena would make a good doctor, and it worked out. First, Zena graduated from university, then from internship, and then she went to work at the city's central hospital. She worked as a surgeon. At that time, Vasily toiled tirelessly on abroad trips. At first it was difficult to live, but then Zena and Vasily put up with everything. After a while, Vasily pleased his wife, "Darling, tomorrow we're moving out of this hostel. I bought a flat." Zena was delighted. But another problem arose. The hostel was in the center of the city, and Zena had to walk a few blocks to the hospital. The flat was on the outskirts. Of course, she could have taken the streetcar to work, but the streetcars ran from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, and sometimes she had to leave work after midnight. At first, Zena took a taxi, but it was not an option. Taxi drivers charged huge amounts of money for the fare. However, nothing was impossible for Vasily. He solved the problem there too. He bought his wife a car, and his salary allowed it. And now, Vasily said to his wife, showing her the keys, "It's time for you to go to the driving school. Do not worry. I've already signed you up. From Monday, you get out. The instructor's name is Tom Carey." Well, Zena understood that she could not drive without a license, but she wanted to devote her free time to herself, and here she would have to adjust her work schedule so that she could work at the hospital first, and then attend the driving school. Since then, the relationship between Zena and Vasily had become strained. At first it was just quiet, peaceful arguments, and then it escalated to scandals. Eventually, Zena would sit down on the bed and blatantly cry, muttering, "You don't love me? Stop it. What was I looking at when I married you?" And so on and so forth. Vasily was a man of mood. Sometimes he calmed his wife down, other times he just added fuel to the fire, and then the scandal would flare up with renewed vigor. And one day, Vasily came back from a long voyage and saw his wife very subdued. "At last, she won't be nagging me." He exhaled with relief. His wife really had stopped messing with his mind, and Vasily was dissolving into that bliss, and his conversations with Zena became quiet, peaceful. She asked him about life behind the wheel. He asked her about her work with patients. He knew that these days, Zena was the only one the other doctors prayed for when it came to complicated cases. During her time in surgery, she had earned a very good reputation, and if someone was going to be put on the operating table, it was only Zena they asked for as a surgeon. And Vasily was considered the best among his colleagues. He was not afraid of rain or snow. One day, Vasily was about to take an evening trip. "I'll be back tomorrow," he told his wife, kissed her on the cheek, and left for the road transport company. Good luck, Zina said after him. What Zina did next was of no interest to Vasily at the moment. The fact was that in the company where Vasily worked, the trucks had no assigned drivers. This time, Vasily got a Renault Magnum that had been in several accidents. Alas, the other trucks are either on the road or under scheduled maintenance, the boss said. This did not please Vasily, but there was nothing to do. He inspected the truck, then a trailer, took an itinerary, and hit the road. However, Vasily did not manage to get very far. As soon as he left the city, problems with pneumatics began, and it appeared that the problem was with the hauler, not with the trailer. They gave me a tumble-down caravan instead of the normal hauler, shouted Vasily at the wheel, but continued driving. One can understand him, it was an international trip. Only one thing was bad, a strict schedule, which had to be followed. Yeah, you will follow the schedule when you are afraid to accelerate. Vasily smirked. He feared that he might not be able to stop the hauler if it accelerated, because the pneumatics wouldn't work, and once it did not work. When Vasily tried to apply the brake on the downhill slope, the relevant pedal failed. It was a steep descent, but in some ways Vasily was lucky. The hauler has a manual gearbox. So, shifting to a lower gear, Vasily slowed down and braked to the side of the road. After that he called the chief mechanic. Hello, he answered. Why the hell did you give me a faulty truck? Vasily immediately attacked him. By now he had recovered from the stress he had experienced recently, and now he felt angry. What's wrong with the car? The man asked as if he did not understand anything. The brakes did not work. Seems to be all right now, but when I was descending a steep hill, listen man, I almost hit a school bus. All right, there's a substitute driver on the other hauler headed your way. Vasily stalled out. He suppressed the scolding he wanted to give the mechanic and said soothingly, and the supervisor informed me that the other haulers are either on the road or on routine maintenance. Yes, and scheduled maintenance on one of them has already been completed. That's it, the driver's on his way to you. Bye. The mechanic hung up and Vasily was left alone with his anger. The substitute driver turned up an hour later. Can you drive back on your own? He asked. If there's no rush, I'll make it. I'll take my chances at least. Well, good luck. They drove off in different directions. As Vasily was approaching the border of the city, the sky on the horizon turned a fiery color. The sun had gone down and the road was in semi-darkness. The cars followed with their headlights on. At one point, Vasily spotted a car on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. At first Vasily did not react to the car, but then he noticed that it was his wife's car. Vasily knew that Zina had already completed her driving school and had obtained her driving license, but she did not use the car very often. Still, an express tram was more familiar to her. What is she doing here in the countryside? Bing thought fastly. He drove past his wife's car, slowed down. The pneumatics didn't fail now, set the alarm as well, and went to the car. Strange thing, there was no one in the car. Or Vasily took a closer look. Despite the semi-darkness, he saw someone on the back seat. More than one, it seemed. Vasily shook his head. Is it me, or is Zina really not alone in there? He walked over to the car and stiffened with a mixture of surprise and renewed anger. In the backseat, Zina and driving instructor Tom Curry were doing their natural thing. Zina was down at first. She squinted in pleasure, then opened her eyes and shouted frighteningly. Alarm. Curry immediately fell off the seat, pulled up his trousers, looked at Vasily in surprise, and with a feeling that he was about to get in trouble. Vasily jerked the car door handle. It was locked open up. He yelled and his wife immediately opened it. Vasily jerked the door handle again, and the door opened. Then Vasily pulled Curry out of the cabin and pushed him into the small lake that sprawled nearby. You, bitch, get behind the wheel fast and follow my hauler. He pointed to the Renault Magnum in front of the car. Zina was so frightened that she complied immediately without hesitation. The two of them drove to the motor pool. Vasily surrendered the truck to the boss and got behind the wheel of his wife's car himself. Zina drove and looked at the city doomfully. She knew what was about to happen. Vasily would not forgive her, so she would probably have to pack her bags and look for a new home. Strange thing for Zina, there had been no scandal at home. Vasily had not said anything at all. No, he had not withdrawn into himself. He had simply stopped noticing Zina. No communication, no tenderness, nothing. Well, I got off easy, thought Zina. She worked as before. After all, family problems should not worry her. Patience. And Vasily worked. No, he had not forgotten the grudge against his wife. He longed for revenge, but he understood that it was too early. It is necessary to think through everything to the end. But no matter what he thought, it all seemed nonsense to him, and that made Vasily even angrier. Sometimes he was so angry that he wanted to tear the hell out of the flat. Of course, Vasily did not tear up the flat. It had been bought with his money after all. And it wasn't his wife. He decided to take revenge. On 2 weeks later, Zina was on night duty. As usual, suddenly, she was called by the head doctor. Zina. A patient came in with a penetrating lung wound. At least it's suspected so far. Please save him. Zina's insides went cold. She tried not to show it to anyone, but her hands trembled. They shook even more when Zina saw police officers outside the operating room. That night she had to operate on Tom Carey. Fortunately, the penetrating wound to the lung was not confirmed, but the wound was still severe. And the operation took a long time. Escalation at work. Zina curled up all her emotions and forced herself to act coolly and judiciously. In the end, Kerr's life was out of danger. When the instructor came out of the anesthetic, Zina leaned over him and asked pityingly, "Who did this to you?" And Tom began to tell the story. That night, he was walking home from the illegal casino. The mood was good. He had just won a large sum of money. At that moment, Vasily came around the corner out of the pitch blackness. "First here I am, I quitting," she said and grinned evilly. "But you ready for a reckoning, you wretch?" "For what reckoning?" Curry asked in a trembling voice. "Come to think of it, Zina, the car, the track, the back seat." But, here's the but. Vasily, a little tipsy, smashed a beer bottle on Tom's head. The instructor staggered but did not fall over. He punched the driver in the face with his fist. Vasily grinned again, spat the blood, asked contemptuously, "Is that the best you can do, smartass?" Rick Curry then punched Vasily in the face a few more times. The driver only staggered back. He looked at the instructor with contempt. There was no anger left in him towards this flabby and obviously frightened man. And even cheating on his wife with this stupid man now seemed different to Vasily than before. Now he thought that Zina had made such a bold move purely out of pity for Tom. Still, Vasily punched the instructor in the face. He hit him so hard that he collapsed on the pavement. That's when Curry pulled out a knife, waved it in Vasily's face, and even cut the trucker a few times. "Let's be folks," said Vasily. Vasily intercepted the hand with the knife and jabbed it, the hand with the knife, into Tom's stomach. Vasily knew there were no witnesses. His fingerprints weren't on the knife either. He could walk away and not think about anything. And Tom was found bleeding by a random woman. She called the ambulance. Well, you know the rest. Curry summed up his story. "And then what do you think to do?" Zina asked. "What next? File a police report? But don't even think about it. Why not?" Tom was surprised. "I bet Vasily is still my husband. Whatever he is, he's my husband. So what? How's that supposed to affect me? I'm going to file a complaint anyway." "No, you won't. You won't," Zina said confidently. "Otherwise you won't get out of here." She leaned down over Tom and said in a whisper, "You could stay here forever and no one would even think that I set this whole thing up." Tom sighed. It was a shame to be disappointed in Zina. He liked her, but there was nothing he could do about it. For to him, she was an arsehole. However, going forward, it's worth noting that Tom never pressed charges against Vasily. No matter how many times the police questioned him, he always said he had no recollection of his attackers. In the end, the cops backed off. True, Tom didn't have long to live anyway. One day, when he was in debt in that very illegal casino, some musclemen came to him and beat him to death. And Zina, well, she came home after the operation and asked her husband sternly, "So did you do it?" What Vasily didn't understand. "You stabbed Tom," Zina yelled and cried. "Yes, I did stab him, so what?" Vasily responded indifferently. He wasn't afraid of prison. What he wanted, he did. Now be what one's like. "So what?" Zina burst into tears. "Yes, so what?" Zina burst into tears. "Yes, so what? Be glad you didn't get any trouble from me. Be glad I took my anger out on your instructor." "That's not fair, is it?" that the wife screamed. "What's not fair?" Vasily's voice was still indifferent. "That's the cowardice. Cheating with the instructor when the husband is on a trip. Yes, it is not fair. And then protect this cheater is also unfair." "Well, forgive me, darling." The wife slightly calmed down. "Stono, get the hell out of this flat. I'll give you a week to move out." "You can't do that," Zina screamed desperately. And she burst into tears. "It won't do you any good," Vasily said in cold blood. "You are a traitor. Go away, you scum." She lived with Vasily for 3 more days and then changed her flat to a prison cell. After the scandal with Vasily, Zena was severely depressed. No matter how hard she tried to force herself to work, nothing helped her. In the end, she committed serious negligence, due to which the patient almost died. After an investigation, it was decided to put Zena behind bars for a fixed term. By this point, Vasily had found a new family. The new wife, a tram driver, would certainly not be unfaithful. Vasily was sure of that, and so it was later on. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.